Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 9th episode of the story in which Naruto accomplished the impossible. You cannot stop the flow of time. Its will only rotates in one direction. A mere human cannot change that path. This story is from Dorsey. Please support him, her. She is also a digital artist, so please visit her profile. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Naruto immediately shook the icy hand from his shoulder when he felt solid ground under his feet again, twisting to the side. However, his graceful movement faltered as he bumped into a long wooden table slumping under papers, files, scrolls, flasks, and an insurmountable number of various glass vials filled with colorful liquids. Naruto's heart rate increased as he received a sudden rush of adrenaline when his eyes met with an unidentifiable creature's body in a big glass cylinder, motionlessly floating in a yellowish liquid. Still jumpy around me. I'll take that as a compliment. Where are we? He wanted to ask the fox in his mindscape, but the question slipped out from his mouth aloud as he turned around to face the Sannin. In one of my laboratories under Konoha. Orochimaru answered casually while he motioned toward a door at the end of the room. Just play along, remember the plan we discussed. Naruto narrowed his eyes but followed the Sannin to the next room, which contained the same site. Only one thing was different: there was a metal examining table at the back of the room. The laboratory was different than what Naruto originally had imagined of the snake's nest, where the man had done his nasty experiments with Yamato Teicho and countless others. It was absolutely nothing like he had expected. The place was clean like a hospital instead of a dirty cave, the walls covered with white tiles. The most suspicious things were the dissected animals soundlessly floating in some kind of liquid. He couldn't find any bodies hanging from the ceiling, or cells holding wailing captives. Nor could he see any blood stains in the room. It was spotless. However, he could still smell the faint, metallic scent of the crimson-red liquid. His eyes drifted to the left part of the room, where the smell was the strongest, and he spotted a large freezer next to the wall. A half-smile appeared on the Sannin's face as he followed Naruto's gaze. He slowly walked to the freezer and opened it to reveal hundreds, maybe even 1,000, neatly labeled small vials containing the aforementioned red essence. Blood samples, mostly from Fire Country. They're not that hard to gather. Shinobi have a tendency to bleed a lot. Naruto nodded at the explanation, however, he didn't know exactly why. The hair on the back of his neck had been on high alert ever since he had set foot into the lab, and despite it really looking like a normal hospital lab, it unnerved him like nothing else before. This wasn't good. He had thought the snake would bring him to the place where he was doing his questionable experiments, filled with evidence against him. If he acted now, he would be hunted down as a murderer. We have to find evidence before we can do anything. Act according to the plan, but don't let him do anything too suspicious. It seemed Kurama had come to the same conclusion. Like what? Even the way he breathes is suspicious. Like give you a shot or anything like that, you idiot. You somehow managed to trick my senses. No one has been able to sneak up on me. Naruto presented the question that had been bothering him from the very beginning. An annoyed snort bubbled out from the back of Orochimaru's throat. I'm one of the Sannin, foolish little boy. I could sneak inside a Kage summit and sit down next to your brother or Saradobai Sensei impersonating one of the leaders, and they would have no clue that it was me. Not even my naive, aging teacher would notice it. I've been fooling this whole village for months, and you think that tricking you, of all people, is impossible? The snake raised an eyebrow. You are more arrogant than I first thought. The blonde narrowed his eyes into slits, teeth clenched together to restrain himself from simply kicking the Sannins, but now in his annoyance. Indeed, the snake was absolutely right. He acted arrogantly, too overconfident in his own skills. He had been acting like a real idiot. Something he thought he had grown out of over the years. At least most of it. The pale man eyed the teen in front of him, waiting for a reply, but when none came he shrugged and motioned toward the back of the lab. "Torakuken, lay down there." Naruto slowly walked toward the metal examining table where Orochimaru pointed, but he leaned against it instead. "I will stand, thanks. And no straps or shots. If you want a blood sample I will give it to you by my own hand." Jumpy and paranoid. "What do you think I will do to you?" Naruto didn't answer, only narrowed his eyes in his suspicion, and Orochimaru let it be, as in the end shrugged and handed over a vial to him. "Fill at least the half of it with blood." Naruto obeyed, slicing his palm open, letting the crimson liquid flow freely into the vial. His actions were followed by Orochimaru's hungry gaze. "It isn't healing as fast as I once saw," the snake remarked, eyeing his still open wound, waiting for an answer that never came. "I take it you can control your healing rate." I'm curious. Will your body reject a transplanted organ? Could you grow back a severed limb? Or an eye, for example? So many possibilities." Orochimaru mused, his eyes sparkling with a hungry light. Naruto didn't open his mouth to answer, however the question left him dumbfounded. Could Kurama actually do it? "There is a slight chance, but I don't advise you try it. I've never had to do anything like that. Like I would seriously try it." "Geez, I was just musing. I also need tissue samples." Naruto raised an eyebrow questioningly, and then glanced down to his still open wound and back to the Sannin, who rolled his eyes. "Hair will be fine for now." The Chunin nodded and handed over a small blonde tuft obediently. While the snake turned around with his samples, Naruto's experienced fingers trailed to the bottom of the ice-cold examining table. When he found the right location he stiffened in a slight, almost unnoticeable amount of nature's and his own. Chakra traveled from his fingertip toward the metal surface, to sketch a miniaturized, ink-black seal on it. A small, easy, but very useful trick he found in one of Jiraiya's old scrolls at Mount Myaboku. It was a small tracing seal which could be sensed only in Sage mode, so when he finally got out of here he would be able to locate it from a safe distance. His eyes widened when the snake suddenly stopped and glanced back over his shoulder with a puzzled expression on his face, then it slipped into an amused smirk. Well. Messing with nature's energy isn't for kids. It seems there's more to you than I first thought. There goes our plan." Kurama muttered in his mindscape, and a sheepish smile appeared on Naruto's face. "The feeling is mutual." The snake grimaced at the oblique offensive words, and put the vial away before turning around to march to the tense teen. His arm moved to grab his cheeks, but Naruto was faster. With one graceful twist he was behind the Sannin with a cocky smile on his face. "No touching, snake face." An angry grimace replaced the previous amusement in Orochimaru's expression, and he turned to face the blonde time traveler while folding his arms across his chest. His eyes traveled along Naruto in a new, calculating manner. After one long intense silent minute, the snake started to chuckle. My. There goes my theory. I thought you were made artificially in a lab to assassinate Minato-kun and that your regeneration ability was a symptom of the mixture of increased body growth and Uzumaki genes. A brainless vessel with inserted memories, skills and planted orders. And your addiction to peace was only to gain Minato's and my foolhardy teammates' trust. I really thought that your abilities and techniques were just implanted to have the skills to get rid of Minato-kun. But using senjutsu isn't something which can be simply implanted. It requires long years of experience and not to mention spiritual peace. And I doubt it was Jiraiya who taught it to you. Naruto tilted his head to the side and dismissively folded his arms across his chest, letting out an angry snarl. I'm not some kind of freaky clone or something, Dadabayo. I'm really Minato's relative. Only your sick and wicked mind would come up with a theory like that. The snake tilted his head to the side, observing the blonde Chunin with increased curiosity. Then what are you? Why would I tell you anything? Naruto's body stiffened to gather nature's energy, but Orochimaru jumped into action before he could finish the process. A snake shot forward from under his sleeve to bite Naruto's neck and to distract him, but a moment later, the snake's head dropped to the ground and disappeared with a puff of smoke as the blonde severed its head with razor-sharp wind chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when the small amount of senjutsu collected this time expanded his senses enough that he could feel the people on the other side of the wall not 10 meters away from where they stood. At least a dozen weak people placed in small groups, maybe cells in the hidden room. What's behind this room? Another set of snakes shoot forward, utilizing the frozen and shocked state of the blonde to clamp down on his arms, neck and torso, restraining him from every small movement, while something also kept him from gathering nature's energy, or use his own chakra. Now I'm pissed off. Naruto let out a snarl and he was about to call for Kurama's chakra when a fling of a tail in his mindscape stopped him. Wait a little bit. Let's see what he wants from us. I'm curious. In the next blink Kurama found himself with a dumbfounded Naruto. Curious? You are curious? The emotionless mask was gone, the blonde's face moved into the perfect mixture or disbelief, anger and irritation. Let me get this straight. At least 24 snakes are currently biting into my flesh and you are telling me to wait, because you are curious? The fox smirked. Just relax. He is just a small fly. We are way stronger than him if we're using our full power. We need more information before we kick his ass. The blonde growled, but obeyed as Orochimaru's sinister voice stabbed the silence. Well, it seems I have to stop toying with you. It's a shame. I wanted to play with you a little bit more. But once I figure out your healing abilities you will be a perfect subject for my experiments. Maybe I'll finally be able to transplant a Sharingan into a new body. A sinister smile spread across his face, then he turned around and with one flick of his hand, they disappeared from the room and reappeared in the next one with one quick shunshin. Azure eyes ran through the surroundings, noting the cages and bars carved into the hard surface. Then they were locked on the site behind the iron bars. Hospital beds were lined up, each of them holding a captive. A child, a woman or a man under heavy sheets and straps. Everything was silent around them, the people currently occupying the prisons were either too weak or frightened to move, instead they were hiding at the back in the shadows or they were motionless under their sheets. However, one pair of weary eyes flared open for a moment before the small head dropped back from exhaustion. Don't be concerned. It's nothing personal. The Sannin chatted casually and sent a small, almost sincere smile and slowly walked out from the prison, tearing away Naruto's gaze as he was dragged out and they entered a giant cave. Orochimaru dragging his captive all the way to the opposite side, toward another passage. Naruto strained his endurance over his limits, desperately trying to fight against his urge to kick the irritating pale shinobi to the other world. An idea popped up, finally averting his previous thoughts. Minato is going to look for me and find this place eventually. Don't be so sure in that. We are deep inside the Hokage monument. Nobody will hear you, smell you, nor sense your chakra. I could even put a bijou in here and your brother would never even take notice of it. If there wasn't a snake around his neck, Naruto would tilt his head to the side questioningly. Do you think he is bluffing? Kurama shrugged, but a sinister smile spread across his fluffy face in his pleasure. A bijou? Naruto asked curiously. The Sannin chuckled, stopped in the middle of the giant cave and turned to face the young boy, pointing his finger high toward the ceiling. With one movement of his other wrist, the snakes around Naruto's neck moved, forcing his body to move independently from his will and his head followed Orochimaru's finger. The Chunin's eyes widened. He already saw something similar to this once when he was training with Killer Bee on that creepy island. He hadn't had a clue as to what those were at the time, however he was smarter this time. Well, at least a little. Azure eyes were glued in the pattern, tracing the lines, curves and symbols. Ancient seals were carved all along the high ceiling. Countless numbers of barriers were layered on top of each other and tied together, creating a thick layer of chakra concealing seals. Orochimaru left the boy lost in his own small world, his amber eyes observing the blonde with a satisfied smile on his face, watching as realization struck the boy. This place is ancient, it was here even before Konoha was founded. No one else even knows about its existence. This place was used to tame one of the bijou in secret. Naruto forced his gaze back to the Sannin as much as the snakes let him, with a wondering expression on his face. A sinister smirk spread across Orochimaru's features, waiting for the blonde to become frightened when he finally realized that this would be the end. But his smile suddenly slipped into a suspicious glare when a wide, foxy, but altogether satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face instead of fear. Then the blonde opened his mouth and his eyes sparkled with an odd light. Perfect. Minato glanced at his beautiful betrothed with a soft smile on his face, watching as Kushina bit into the food. Even the sauce currently sliding toward her chin from her soft lips looked cute, it didn't mess her perfect image. Kushina ate with closed eyes, but her eyebrow soon started to twitch with irritation. "Why are you staring at me?" Minato didn't answer, only his smile widened a bit. Kushina sent a suspicious gaze but in the end let it go and glanced up to the clock on the wall and sighed. "Toriku's late. I think he went out for ramen with that Iwa genin." Kushina raised a surprised and confused brow. A genin from Iwa having ramen with a leaf shinobi? Geez, the world's been turned upside down. Minato let out a loud chuckle and his previous smile widened into a grin in the end. Yeah. Who thought this could ever happen? But nothing is impossible if he is involved. You should have seen it, Kushina. He broke the walls between the nations like it was nothing. Minato snapped his fingers to punctuate his words. Their soft chuckles filled the room for a long minute until it finally died down. Kushina. When the exams are over, let's have the wedding. What do you think? We dwelled long enough as an unofficial pair. Let's make it finally official. Kushina's wide smile was the only answer he needed. The rest of the dinner went smoothly, sharing small, knowing smiles and quick kisses until the last beams of the late winter sun disappeared behind the Hokage monument. Kushina stretched her arm to place a plate back to its place, when she suddenly stiffened, the power disappearing from her body, letting the plate slip out from her graceful fingers and it reached the hard surface of the floor with a harsh and loud crash as it shattered into a dozen pieces. Minato rushed inside the room, his eyes widening at the scene, watching motionlessly on the edge of panic as Kushina grabbed her stomach and rolled up to ease away something. In the next blink he was next to her, his eyes filled with concern and worry. Kushina. What's the matter? The redhead gritted her teeth and squeezed her eyes shut in concentration as she answered. The fox. Something is wrong with it. It suddenly became restless. The seal is breaking? Is it hurting you? Kushina shook her head. No, it's still intact, it just feels odd. Like the fox is tapping on the inside of my stomach. Let me check it. The girl nodded and Minato gently picked her up and placed her on the couch. Experienced hands trailed above the now free design of the seal on her belly, but just the sight of it made Minato frown in his confusion. It was visible, like Kushina was continuously tapping into the fox's reserves. With a small amount of his own chakra, he let his senses spread inside the design, looking for any abnormality. But he found none. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes into slits, observing the grinning blonde boy surrounded by his summons, paralyzing his chakra reserves and also the ability to gather senjutsu. A small extra addition to their poison he himself developed in case he ever had to deal with Jiraiya. The boy's cocky expression didn't falter, and the snake's face moved into an annoyed grimace. He raised his other arm to finally erase that grin from that impertinent boy's face. But before he could trigger his next move, his summons restraining the boy disappeared in the next blink, shrouding the Chunin inside thick chakra clouds from his wide and surprised eyes. The clouds were in no hurry to dissolve in the motionless air around them. The confident voice of the boy suddenly stabbed the tension as it echoed back and forth from the walls of the giant empty cave. Bringing me here was an unlucky idea. But thanks anyway. The clouds slowly started to fade away, their puffy surface was gently illuminated with gold, just like the clouds in the rising sun. With a flicker of Naruto's wrist, wind chakra surged from his form, flushing away the last remains of the chakra enchained mist, and the place around him perfused with golden light. It seems I don't have to hold back. Naruto sent a beaming grin to the frozen Sannin. Orochimaru's amber eyes widened to an unnatural size by his shock, his gaze locked on the golden chakra flames, the crimson-colored eyes and the dilated pupils. In the next moment he shook off his temporary stasis and narrowed his eyes as he observed his opponent from a new angle. Soon, his sinister smirk was there again. A perfectly trained Jinchuriki. So no new bloodline abilities or something like that, how disillusioning. But which one? The one tail has just been sealed into the Kazekage's youngest son, and you also managed to straighten the seal, based on my network. The 2 and 8 tails are at Kumo for certain. The Mizukage has got the 3 tails in him, while the 4 and 5 tails vessels were still wandering around the nations, but I'm also confident that they are still alive. The 7 tails is participating in this very Chunin exam, while our Minatakon plays with the 9 tails. The only one I know nothing certain of is the 6 tails. However, I heard the rumors that it belongs to Kiri. Orochimaru trailed off, observing Naruto as if he was some kind of fascinating puzzle which has to be solved. I never thought Kiri's scientist would ever reach this advanced level. A result of a brilliant transgenic experiment. If I think about that, they were able to mix Uzumaki DNA in a living body, and as a joke of fate that it is Namake's long-lost brother to create a perfect vessel for the 6 tails. Did you run away from the lab? Naruto grimaced and an irritated snarl bubbled out behind his grown canines. I'm not the result of some kind of fucked up experiment, you snake freak. And I don't house the 6 tails. You are tapping in the absolute wrong direction. The snake grimaced, and shrugged. It doesn't matter. Once I'm finished with you, I'll have enough time to figure out what you are. Naruto narrowed his eyes as one of the snake's arms traveled behind his back and he felt a slight surge of chakra behind the Sannin. He didn't have to think about what he was doing because in the next blink Orochimaru flung into action, and with one jump, he gracefully landed in front of him in an elegant crouch. The pale man twisted his body to slam his opened hand into his stomach, the tips of his fingers already shined with purple chakra, to seal away his tenant's power and make him unable to use any kind of chakra properly for a long time. Gogyo Fuin. 5 Elements Seal. The attack was quick, it was sudden, but Naruto's composure didn't falter. The seal was only centimeters from his stomach when a golden chakra arm surged from his torso, grabbing the Sannin's wrist and elegantly throwing him to the other side of the cave. By the impact of his pale body, the hard surface cracked and debris surged inside the cave. The echoing noise of landing debris filled the cavern almost immediately. With one more elegant movement of Naruto's wrist, a surge of wind cleared the debris and the smoke, revealing an angrily snarling Sannin. I won't let you do that this time. The snake rolled his head side to side to get rid of his irritation and slowly straightened himself to casually throw his long black hair behind his back, out from his sight, and narrowed his amber eyes. What do you mean by this time? Naruto received a mental slap from his fluffy tenant and a sheepish, embarrassed grin spread across his face. Nothing. With one last cocky grin, the blonde Chunin flung into action to pin the Sannin in an enormous taijutsu battle. Naruto sent a chakra-enchained fist toward the frowning pale man, who avoided the attack with one elegant twist. An annoyed growl left his lips, a chakra arm emerged from his back, to catch up with the pale man's fluid deflections. Their style was the perfect match of each other. While Orochimaru's movements screamed perfection and precision gained by practicing every single kata until they were flawless, Naruto's movements were the perfect opposite. There were only small flashes of one or two perfect stances, most of his movements were made by pure instinct. While Orochimaru was the perfect, calm motion in his movements, Naruto was the maelstrom he was named after. He was wild, unstoppable and unpredictable, leaving behind debris and destruction where he put a hand or foot. Be it the Sannin's body or simply the floor he touched. While the snake used perfect stances to avoid an attack, Naruto simply tried to break through his defense with brute power, not caring about his own openings. I want to have a piece of him also. Naruto snorted and a clone popped into existence in the next moment, his features already moving something more animalistic until a wide and sinister smirk appeared on his face. He is all yours, furball. Kurama had sent an annoyed glare in reply, before his attention snapped back to the heavily breathing pale man. Orochimaru the Snake Sannin. I longed for this moment for a long time. I'll have a sweet time killing you slowly. Naruto grimaced and stepped to the side to slip away from another attack of the Sannin, who almost immediately split his attention between the two opponents. The bijou, I assume? His only answer was a widening smirk. Kurama immediately flung into action, the clone's nails extended into razor-sharp claws and he dashed toward the snake, who jumped back to avoid the insanely fast attack. Golden chakra cloud started to bubble around the clone and Naruto decided that it would be best for him if he simply stepped to the side and let Kurama blow some steam which had been accumulating since they had arrived in the past. The golden chakra slowly faded away to give place to the slowly gathering nature's energy. He watched as three tails came to life behind his clone, currently controlled by Kurama. The smirk moved into a dangerous and satisfied grimace as power surged through Kurama's borrowed body. Claws slashed toward the Sannin with increased speed, inking thin, crimson-red lines on pale skin, tearing away pieces of cloth, a defensively raised kunai shattered in two after one slash. Another tail came to life between two attacks, the once animalistic clone of Naruto slowly disappeared and was replaced by a miniature version of Kurama. It was odd. The battle and the fox's movements were animalistic, they were primitive and barbaric, each of his attacks screamed power and brute force. But somehow behind the rough surface it was still royale in an ancient way. Behind the beastly movements Naruto could also see graceful and fluid motions of a perfectly composed fast waltz. It was fascinating seeing Kurama's and Orochimaru's enormous battle. It was fast, it was simple. And it was deadly. There was no time for flashy jutsu between the lightning-fast strikes. It was sheer taijutsu. And the clone was still there, untouched, while the Sannin bled from countless small cuts and bruises. Naruto decided that Kurama had played long enough, he almost felt bored. However, before he could make a step further into the fight, something made him freeze in place and his eyes to widen. The golden chakra around Kurama slowly became orange with a red tint as two more tails came into existence, his expression became more and more furious than before. Slowly, the consciousness started to fade away from his friend's eyes as anger and fury took over its place. The chakra that once emitted life and warmth in the last year now felt menacing and evil like in the old times. An angry growl echoed in his own mindscape and a tug from his stomach kicked him out from his frozen state. It was Kurama in his own self. He was struggled against his own instincts. A hint of long-felt animalistic anger flushed through Naruto's own mind from the ancient old bijou, sending chills down his back. Naruto, something is wrong. Dismiss that damn clone or he'll go nuts. Naruto nodded and raised his hands to make the necessary seal and the clone popped out from existence with one last furious glance toward his original. What the hell? Naruto growled to himself. Don't use my full power until we figure out what the hell happened. Only in sage mode. The blonde nodded in agreement, already gathering nature's energy. Nothing could be heard beside Orochimaru's harsh breathing. The snake, utilizing the opening, ran through a long chain of hand signs between two breaths. Chakra smoke filled the cave, shrouding the bastard from blue eyes, but Naruto could still sense the drastically increased smell of reptile. An annoyed grimace appeared on his face, when the dismissing smoke slowly started to reveal the scaled skin of a giant summon. I have to admit you caught me off guard, Torakukan. I never thought anyone would be that bold, letting the Bijou gain control over a clone. Even Uzumaki Kushina isn't as much of an idiot to do something as reckless as that. A deep growl bubbled out from the back of Naruto's throat as his mother's name slipped from Orochimaru's mouth. But before he could retort, the snake flung into action. The giant serpent rushed forward with insane speed, forcing Naruto to jump from out of its way. It wasn't just any of his summons. It was Manda. The biggest, strongest, and the fastest. Naruto, biting on his thumb, smearing blood, ran through the hand signs of the summoning technique and slammed his palm onto the ground, only to receive a mental slap from his never-missing fluffy companion when nothing happened. Idiot. Naruto scratched his head sheepishly. His movements were followed by Orochimaru's narrowed and suspicious eyes. Yeah, it just slipped out from my mind, stupid time thingy. Naruto whispered into the air. Don't talk aloud. Naruto winced as Kurama barked out with a harsh voice. Now he was really missing his summoning contract so much he couldn't even describe it. Before he could continue his line of thought, Orochimaru got tired of his inner discussion with the Bijou and sent a giant fireball toward the blonde teen, who easily jumped out from its way with an annoyed grimace on his face. Hey! Don't interrupt my discussion, you snake freak. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes on the top of Manda's head and flung into action one more time, not even bothering to retort. Debris flew across the cage as the summon's enormous body made connection with the surface where Naruto stood a moment before. The named blonde snorted and jumped up to join Orochimaru on his summon's head. The Chunin gracefully landed in a crouch, his azure eyes traveled up to the annoyed Sannin and jumped into action. He aimed a hit toward Orochimaru's spine, but he easily avoided his attack. Naruto grimaced when his next kick was also easily deflected, and that was the point when he felt as the Sannin was also surrounded by nature's energy. It wasn't as defined as him, nor as Kabuto's back then, but it was there. He infused his senses with its help to deflect his attacks. It's time to move to some frog kumite, don't you think, Kurama? He grinned when his companion made an agreeing nod in his mindscape. He suddenly changed stance, his hand shot toward the widening eyes of the Sannin, who wasn't able to dodge. At least not the extended senjutsu. Nor his next punch and the series of kicks he sent immediately after the first one. It was somehow fascinating to see Orochimaru struggle in his hands. He made up his mind suddenly and jumped down from Manda's head. Two clones popped into existence. The sound of the Rasen Shuriken filled everything around them almost immediately as they formed it in no time. The Sannin's eyes widened when the spinning ball of pure energy rushed toward him and his summon, not leaving any time to deflect. Millions of invisible razor-sharp chakra blades rushed toward Naruto's opponent with unstoppable speed. A second later, everything was shrouded by blinding white light as the technique exploded, eating away Orochimaru's form, together with Manda's. The cave was dead silent as the technique's squealing sound finally died down, but the enormous amount of chakra-filled smoke left by the giant summon still lingered in the motionless air. A wide and satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face when the smoke finally cleared and revealed a giant crater in the middle of it, where Orochimaru once stood. But before he could become cocky, a familiar and creepy chuckle bubbled out from the crater. The bloody form of Orochimaru slowly raised, the debris creaked under his foot, stabbing the offensive silence with his every footstep. Did you really think that a boy like you could finish me off that easily? Me, the greatest of the Sannin? Naruto cocked his head to the side, hissing his answer behind his gritted teeth. Yeah. I did. Bastard! But I have to admit, you continuously caught me off guard. You are unpredictable. If Manda didn't shield me, I would be nothing more than a corpse. He flung his black hair behind his shoulders, out from his sight with a casual wave of his hand. It's a mistake I won't make once more. Orochimaru smirked. We will see. Naruto answered with a casual tone and with a straight face, something he had picked up from his father, which always managed to push opponents over the edge. And it seems, by Orochimaru's suddenly angry grimace, he wasn't an exception. His expression slowly smoothened as the previous anger evaporated. Orochimaru smirked before he opened his mouth. I still got some ace up in my sleeve, my child. In the next blink, the Sannin's hand blurred by the insanely fast pace at which he was forming hand signs. And despite the fact that Naruto didn't hesitate even a second and rushed toward his opponent, this time he couldn't keep up with the speed. Yamata no Jutsu. Eight-headed serpent jutsu. He had to jump backward as Orochimaru finished preparing his technique, his form disappearing once again inside the white smoke which followed his jutsu. With a sudden rush from his palm, the smoke immediately cleared to reveal a giant white, dragon-like thingy. Naruto's eyes widened. A giant, pure white serpent-like thing stood where Orochimaru once was, its scaled skin containing a countless number of spikes. He grimaced as he counted its heads. All of its 8 heads held razor-sharp fangs bigger than himself, and he could only compare their size to Kurama's own fangs. They were maybe even bigger. You know, Kurama, you said not to use our joint power, but I think we should put that agreement aside. He let out a relieved sigh when he felt Kurama's nod. They had to be careful. Whatever happened to the clone, it could happen to them also. Hopefully the fact that they were their originals and not a clone could prevent it. The giant cave fortunately held enough space for their fight as long as he didn't use a bijou bomb. He winced at the thought of what would happen if he accidentally shot a hole through the Hokage monument from the inside. He pushed those thoughts from his head and let the golden flames encompass his body once again as he dropped the last remains of nature's energy. But this time they didn't stop at the edge of his skin, it moved further and further until Kurama's complete form appeared from it, Naruto staying still on the top of his head. The enormous 8-headed serpent flung into action almost immediately, claws and fangs tore into flesh and pure energy. Cuts and bruises appeared on Naruto's body by the enormous strength of the dragon god's attacks, countless numbers of razor-sharp needles rushed toward his form from one of the heads, while the others threw Raiton, Futon and one katana attack. He was barely able to dodge the Kuzunagi's blade rushing from one of the heads to stab through his heart, but it still gashed a long and deep cut on his side. Anger overwhelmed and blurred his senses just like before. Like the poise suddenly tilted to the wrong side. It was just like before the start of the war. Just like Kurama's old and tainted chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when realization hit him harder than one of Sakura's chakra-boosted punches. Kurama. I know what's happening to us. It's the other you. You told me that you had lost half of your chakra when you fought with Dad. Your other self's in chakra is overwhelming us. His anger and his hatred is what we are feeling. They are somehow leaking toward us through Mom's seals and all those barriers. The giant form of Kurama suddenly froze between two attacks and glanced toward his companion and nodded in understanding. We have to finish this off as quickly as we can. Get serious and don't play around. Deal. Format 22. Naruto nodded and jumped to the head of Kurama again as soon as the bijou locked his opponent under him, pinning down his every head with one chakra arm for each. 8 clones popped into existence, rushing together with the original toward the pinned giant heads of the white serpent, carefully concentrated inky black balls already forming above their heads. In the next blink, the cave was once again shrouded in smoke and debris as the 9 small bijou dama connected with flesh and at once the summon disappeared. Kurama's chakra slowly faded away from existence together with his disturbing rage, back to the original, but this time Naruto didn't let his guard down. He patiently waited for the smoke to finally clear before he reached for nature's energy and finally spotted what he was looking for. Another clone popped into existence, and the two blondes slowly approached the bloody and harshly breathing man laying motionlessly on the floor aside from his chest's fast, fluttering movement. Orochimaru was finally able to turn his head toward the sound of the footsteps for a second before his head dropped back to the ground. A wet but still menacing chuckle bubbled out from his mouth together, with some blood staining the ground under him more. A bijou with 9 tails and in the form of a fox, frog Kumite and Senjutsu training from Mount Mayaboku, a fully developed Rasengan. You gave me so many new pieces for this fine puzzle. Orochimaru's voice was raspy, and Naruto could feel as he strained to not let it falter in the slightest by the pain. However, he didn't answer, he just stood there with his clone, watching the beaten, once proud Sannin. His injuries weren't life-threatening. At least, if he could get medical attention very soon, but he was obviously unable to move even his finger. Kushina's and that Namikaze brat's DNA. Your resemblance even to her, which everyone just overlooked and tossed to the side. Your sudden appearance involving a Sharingan and spacetime ninjutsu. The Sannin closed his mouth, his eyes becoming foggy for a second, before he slowly opened his mouth again. Space and time. Time. Orochimaru murmured into the air, but his eyes flared suddenly with a greedy light. He slowly turned his head to glance up again. Only one question slipped from his lips. How? The blonde hesitated for a moment before he answered with a low tone, but his voice was still sounded somehow relieved. I don't know, I fought with that bastard Uchiha. I wanted to seal him away, and the next thing I know I wake up here and now in the hospital. Naruto shook his head. It doesn't matter now. The bastard already figured it out and somehow he couldn't surpass the urge to finally talk about it with someone. To confess. Even if it had to be Orochimaru. Do you want to go back? I can help you. Put this all to the side and I'll help you. Naruto quickly averted his gaze, his hands clenched into fists, his azure blue eyes flashed with crimson red by his sudden anger. You had done, you will do terrible things in the future. I won't let you go. I can't let you go. I can help you to. Naruto snapped his head back to the Sannin and spat out his words as if it was sour poison interrupting the injured man. You killed and experimented on countless men and women. Even innocent children. On Yamato Teicho. You killed Sande Mejiji. You tried to kill Jiraiya and Tsunade, me from time to time. It's because of you Sasuke defected. You pushed Kabuto to insanity, and if it wasn't for him and your damned Edo Tensei, we could have ended the 4th Shinobi War. If it wasn't for you and your damned technique, Madara would never have been resurrected. A satisfied smirk appeared on the Sannin's blood-stained face. So it was Madara. So that old geezer finally managed to die. Anger and fury overwhelmed Naruto's mind once again, but it was his clone who grabbed the Sannin and shook him. So you know he isn't dead. You know where he's hiding. Tell me. I've still got time before he brainwashes Obito. Orochimaru cocked his head to the side. Obito? You mean the dead last in Minato's team? Kukuku, oh the irony. Orochimaru's eyes suddenly widened. And glanced toward the original. Tell me, did I reach my goal? Did I become immortal? Did I learn every jutsu in the world? Naruto's anger had risen to a new level, but it was once again his clone who shook the Sannin violently instead of his own self. Where is he? Orochimaru's eyes slowly moved to the clone and he smirked. If I get my answer, you will also get yours. Anin equivalent exchange. The Sannin's voice finally faltered as he gasped for air and a painful grimace flashed through his face. Tell me what I want to know and I will tell you what I know about Madara. Naruto clenched his teeth and the clone dropped the Sannin to the ground. You will at least partially reach your goal. As far as I know, you had been able to transfer your consciousness into a new vessel. Into a new body. A wicked and almost insane smirk spread across Orochimaru's face, his expression turned into the mirror of utter ecstasy and he started to laugh almost hysterically. Naruto waited impatiently until the laughter finally stopped by bloody coughing. I told you what you wanted to know. Now it's your turn. Where is Madara's hideout this time? The Sannin smirked and spat out some crimson liquid. Who said that I know where he is? I just knew that he wasn't dead. I found Hashirama's diary. I know he left his body there. He never had the courage to check the body. And I know his body disappeared. I just connected the dots. Naive little Torakukan. Naruto gritted his teeth and turned on his heels to walk away, but the Sannin's raspy voice stopped him. What are you going to do now? I'm leaving. Aren't you going to kill me? I know your little secret. Naruto closed his eyes and answered without turning around. No one is going to believe you. You are a traitor. You are insane and obsessed with power. You will live. You will live a long life in a prison where you can think about your sins. And maybe one day, you will realize what you have done and you will turn away from the darkness. Gigi and Jiraiya never give up on you, so I also won't. A shiver run down Naruto's spine when he heard the snake's almost crazy chuckle. Cuckoo, I'm going to escape. No one is able to hold me back. I'm the strongest of the Sannins. I'm going to be immortal. I can reach my goal. Yet, a 17-year-old boy was able to kick your ass just now, while my teammate killed you in the future. When he was 16, you know. You were pathetic. An angry growl filled the empty cave, soon followed by Orochimaru's hysterical voice with a hint of panic. You told me I was able to move between bodies. I was immortal. Naruto finally glanced over his shoulder. Immortal? Maybe. But not invulnerable. With this one last sentence he slowly continued his walk toward the exit. Orochimaru's angry voice followed him the whole way. He was about to reach the entrance of the passage leading toward the cells to check up on the prisoners, when the Sannins displeased. Shouting suddenly stopped after a loud snap. It was unnaturally loud in the silent cave as it echoed back and forth between the cliffs, reaching his sensitive ears countless times, making his hair stand almost painfully on end. He recognized that sound. But he almost felt too frightened to turn back, knowing what he would find. With the last remains of nature's energy still in him, he sensed Orochimaru's chakra slowly leave his body. But it didn't disappear. Somehow it changed and morphed until it became one with the natures. In the end, Naruto braced himself and slowly turned around. His clone's natural features were nowhere to be seen. Crimson-red dilated eyes and thickened whiskers greeted him, together with the limp body of the once fearsome and proud Sannin. Amber-colored eyes stared into the emptiness in disbelief. Kurama's stolen hands were still hovering over Orochimaru's broken neck. What have you done? Naruto whispered with wide eyes. What both of us know was necessary. You just didn't have the stomach to do so. Kurama answered back in a low tone, eyeing as Naruto hesitantly took one step toward the already cooling body of the Sannin. But he stopped. He had already seen enough dead bodies. He didn't want to see one more. Even if it was Orochimaru. He let him live. He wanted him to live. He didn't want him to die. He just wanted to stop him, to lock him up forever in a dark cell. Kurama let out a sigh, and with one flicker of his borrowed hand, Orochimaru's body was covered with burning red flames, tearing into the dead flash, inferno burning away all the evidence. Naruto's hands squeezed into fist and suddenly he turned and rushed toward his original goal to check on the prisoners when the smell of the burning body reached his nose, but he faltered in the middle of the passage and dropped to his knees when his clone disappeared and his memories returned. His stomach turned upside down, as the memory of the popping sound kept echoing inside his head. His clone's desperate struggle to get control when he realized what Kurama was about to do. The disgusting feeling between his fingers as the vertebra slipped to the side when it couldn't endure the force anymore, and the snapping sound again as it echoed thousands of times inside the empty cave, while Orochimaru's empty and foggy eyes stared back at him with surprise and disbelief. He couldn't fight off the urge. He emptied his stomach where he was, only able to stumble some hesitant steps away from the mess when he dropped to the ground once again and gratefully embraced the offered unconsciousness of his exhausted body to flee from the memories of his first kill. Minato paced back and forth in the living room, impatiently waiting for Jiraiya to finally step out of the room currently housing Kushina. He didn't know what could have happened to the seal and he rushed for Jiraiya as soon as he realized it. But that perverted bastard ordered him to leave, insisting that he was disturbing him in his work. Finally Jiraiya stepped out from the room and the worried Hokage turned on his heels immediately, but his sensei's raised hand stopped him from bursting out his questions. Kushina and the seal are okay. I've put another layer of surpassing seal over the existing ones and it closed the fox's chakra flow completely. She is sleeping now. It won't bother her anytime soon. Minato let out a relieved sigh and dropped onto the couch rubbing his eyes. What happened to the seal? Technically, it is in perfect condition. Jiraiya sent a knowing smile to Minato and winked. Nothing serious. Just some natural reaction with female Jinchuriki. She will tell you soon. Tell me what? Kushina has gained some weight, don't you think? Minato snorted furiously once again and stood up angrily. What are you talking about? Don't beat around the bush. And she is as beautiful as ever. But a hint of a blush betrayed the lie, making the Sannin grin knowingly again. The Hokage eyed the aging pervert for a second before he let out a defeated sigh. Okay. Maybe she gained just a little on her tummy. But if she caught even a hint of what I've told you, she would kill me. Jiraiya let out a low chuckle and shook his head. Oh, believe me, my friend. She won't bite off your head because of it. At least not now. Not until it becomes uncomfortable for her. You know, aqueous ankles, no sleeping on her stomach for months and so on. But you know, she'll get much bigger breasts for your pleasure, so it'll be worth it. Minato's confusion only grew bigger and bigger, so did Jiraiya's smug grin. What the hell are you hinting at, old pervert? A grimace appeared on the toad's face. Geez. People around you tend to forget how you were sometimes, back before you become a hero. Everybody talks about you the same way, a prodigy, a rare genius that appears only once in a generation. Jiraiya trailed off for a second, before he shouted out. But I remember. For a genius you could be really dense occasionally when it wasn't about ninja stuff. For example with the ladies. It's good you've outgrown most of it. I remember when you were just a genin. You used to be as dense as a dead stone, until you reached puberty. If it's not about a jutsu or something. I hope it's nothing genetic. Kushina used to be the same. It could become prominent in your child. Minato raised an eyebrow, his azure blue eyes still observing his teacher suspiciously. And why would you be concerned about that suddenly? Jiraiya let out a sigh and shook his head, mumbling something incoherent under his nose. In the end, Minato just waved a hand and dropped himself on the couch again, realizing he would have to interrogate Jiraiya later to get some real answers out of him. Then he glanced up to the clock to note the very late hour. Where the hell is my brother? Jiraiya snorted. I assume causing trouble, as always. I overheard him inviting the IWA genin from yesterday for ramen if he was able to get into the next round. They still must be at Ichiraku, but... Minato trailed off. Yeah, Ichiraku closes at 10. It's already almost midnight. He won't stay open this late even for your ramen-addicted brother. He must be sitting on your stupid stone head again, musing or philosophizing or whatever he's always doing up there. Minato nodded and tilted his head side to side until he heard the satisfying popping sound as one of his joints slipped back to its proper place. Why don't you just go and pick him up with your Hiration? The seal is still on his back, isn't it? Minato thought about it for a moment and nodded once more. Right. Will you stay here until we get back? I don't want to leave Kushina alone in her state right now. Jiraiya snorted. Oh, don't be afraid. She's got companions. Minato tilted his head again in confusion and let out a sigh, seeing that he won't be able to squeeze out any straight answer from his teacher tonight. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out for his brother's seal and chakra signature. Jiraiya watched him curiously as, instead of disappearing immediately, a frown appeared on his features in his concentration. What? You can't even find a teenage boy's chakra? Jiraiya was about to send another jab, when Minato shook his head and answered, his eyes scrunching as he concentrated even more. But his brow moved into one coherent line. It doesn't feel normal. I can barely sense my marker, and it is somewhere under the Hokage monument. What? Jiraiya snapped and stood up immediately. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I just said. I'm barely able to locate his seal. Like he's under a barrier, buried deep inside the mountain. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. A Doton jutsu? Minato shook his head. No. I saw him trying to use Doton. He really tried. And he was frustrated beyond words when he couldn't pull it out. His chakra is flowing through my seal like, it feels like he's sleeping or he's unconscious. The IWA team? Minato's frown deepened as he reached for his other markers. No. 3 of my best ANBU are watching over them after that incident. All of my markers on the IWA members are in their accommodation, sleeping peacefully. Couldn't you just simply teleport to where he is? Jiraiya's voice was filled with concern now. I've been trying to do so from the beginning, but the seal is weak beyond words. Minato stopped for a second. I got it. With this last yell, the Toad Sannin found himself alone in the living room. Only Kushina's soft snoring leaked inside the empty room. Jiraiya glanced toward the closed door and sighed, softly murmuring into the air around him. I really hope, Kushina, that the baby in your womb won't cause this much trouble, or Minato is going to be a white-haired man the time he hits 30. Minato stumbled into hard rock when he reappeared in the empty passage, meters from his proposed destination thanks to the faint marker. His head connected with the raw surface with a loud bang in the empty and silent passage. The blonde had been desperately trying to force the dancing stars out from his sight, and he was about to shake his head, but he froze in mid-movement as a harsh smell reached his nose. The stink of death, of burnt bodies all around him. And the smell of his brother's blood. He slowly glanced down where he could sense Toriku, and he gasped as he spotted his brother's form lying motionlessly on the floor, his clothes bloody and torn. He rushed toward his brother and slowly turned him over, and he had to restrain another gasp when the stench of someone else's blood flickered through his nose. He immediately made a quick checkup on his relative and let out a relieved sigh. Nothing serious, some wounds and a slash on his side, but it had already half healed. He had passed out because of shock, based on the pattern of his chakra flow. Something new hit his nose from his brother's clothes, the smell of reptiles. The sore smell of snakes. Orochimaru. Azure blue eyes immediately started to map his surroundings, finding several weak chakra signatures not far away from him, but the Sannin was nowhere to be seen or sensed. The thick and disgusting stink of burnt flesh invaded his nose from the other side. He ran to the entrance where the thick stench was coming from, his eyes widened by the enormous empty cave inside the Hokage monument. His eyes ran through the countless number of barrier seals all around the hard surface, noting the signs of an enormous battle and also the charred remains of a body at the other side of it, near an immense crater. The body which, beside the burned flesh, still reeked of snakes. It was Orochimaru. Confusion ran across him, but instead of burying himself in his troubled thoughts, experience kicked itself in line. He made his way back to his brother, but he didn't stop. He took aim at the end of the passage when he heard a groan from there. This time, he couldn't suppress his shocked gasp as the air rushed into his lungs with insane speed by the sight. Dozens of cells were lined on each side of the cave, a quarter of it holding faint, very weak and slowly fading chakra signatures. Most of the people were on the verge of death and only a small push would be enough for them to pass the line. Everything smelled like Orochimaru. It was his place. It was his doings. Minato hurried toward the nearest cell and after a quick survey of its interior, he immediately made an opening between the bars, enough for him to slip inside, toward the small, slumped body laying motionlessly in a dark corner. A child, based on his size not more than 10. The captive didn't react to his presence in even the slightest way, only the weak, rhythmical movement of his chest hinted that the child was indeed alive. Minato made his decision in the next blink. He didn't know what the hell was going on here, but there was no way he would wait for even one more second to get help. He needed Toriku's marker here and he was stable, just unconscious. He blinked and when he opened his eyes in the next second, he reappeared next to his teacher, who opened his mouth to ask what the hell was going on. But Jiraiya didn't have time to speak, Minato's commanding voice filled the room immediately. Umbu. 4 masked and cloaked men appeared beside him in the next blink. Cat, you stay here. Watch over Kushina. Before the soldier could even nod, Minato grabbed Jiraiya and the other 3 stunned shinobi and disappeared from the room. Jiraiya opened his eyes and turned his head when 2 of the elites slumped to the floor by the aftereffects of the Hiration. Minato's commanding voice kicked the wobbly standing Anbu out from his shock, immediately straightening himself. There are cells with captives all across this passage. I'll go grab any available medics and be back in a minute, go check on them and get rid of the bars. The 2 Anbu will be okay in a minute. Toriku is also here, stable, but there is also corpse in there. Jiraiya moved his head where Minato pointed, his eyes widened when he finally recognized his friend's scent under the heavy smell of burned flesh. The unmistakable smell of a serpent. The 2 Anbu gathered themselves surprisingly fast and disappeared with the 3rd at the other side of the passage to obey their leader's order. Jiraiya, it's him. It's Orochimaru's place. Stay professional please. I need you here, calm and collected. The Sannin only distantly felt as he nodded, his eyes were still locked on the small entrance where Minato pointed, not really noticing as his student disappeared. A low moan disturbed his frozen state, the faint sound of ruffling clothes and sudden coughing and spitting interrupted his troubled thoughts. He glanced down to the slowly waking Toriku who suddenly stiffened, his eyes flung open and widened as memories overwhelmed him again. Blue eyes stared into the nothingness unfocused for long seconds until Jiraiya slowly walked closer and leaned over him. Naruto immediately jumped onto his feet when Jiraiya touched his shoulder, not concerned with the already healing slash on his side. He backed off until his back hit a hard surface only to a second later slid down slowly, his eyes staring unblinkingly to his own hands. His breathing was harsh by the sudden surge of adrenaline and an unconscious gag escaped his sore mouth. Jiraiya reached for him once more to shake him out from his state of shock and get some answers he was eager to know, grabbing his shoulders and turned him to be face to face. But the azure blue eyes didn't connect with his own, they were staring somewhere behind him. Jiraiya shook the blonde once again and this time the light of consciousness reappeared in the blue eyes. What happened? The named blonde glanced down to his own hands once again, and for a second Jiraiya thought he wouldn't be able to shake him out from his state once more. But his faint whisper washed out his concern about his sanity. Orochimaru, he brought me here after the premises. He blackmailed me to come with him. He wanted to experiment on me because I heal fast. Then he made up his mind and got me with his snakes. Naruto's hand traveled toward his neck. Despite his healing ability, 2 small and red bite marks were still visible on his neck, together with several more on his arms peeking out under his torn clothes. Then we fought. His whisper slowly died down and Jiraiya squeezed his shoulder to gain his attention. It was successful. Azure blue eyes snap up, to stare into Jiraiya's own. And then what? What happened? Naruto's eyes slipped to the side in shame. And then I, too, killed him. I killed him. His eyes widened when he realized once again as it slipped out from his mouth. His stomach turned upside down again as the memories started to push themselves into his thoughts again and another gag escaped behind his gritted teeth. But this time, he fortunately suppressed the urge. Stay focused. Azure eyes snapped up in alert by the commanding voice, shaking him up again. His breathing steadied and his heartbeat decreased to a normal level, then his eyes widened when he finally realized something very important. There are people down here. He had experimented on them. They need help. Naruto pushed Jiraiya out of his way and jumped to his feet to stumble 2 or 3 steps before he leaned against the wall to get some support. The world dangerously tilted as blood rushed inside his head by the sudden movement. A new thought popped up in his head, immediately sweeping his dizziness to the side. This gave him a new power to lock away his previous shock and his weariness. With a huge chakra wave he mapped out his surroundings and found what he was looking for. Immediately, he rushed to the deeper part of the caves where the cells were, rushing past 2 stunned ANBU with Jiraiya in his heels, heading toward the last cell, ripping the bars out from their place and dropping himself next to a small body. Naruto gently brushed out the spiky brown hair that stuck to the child's face and let out a relieved sigh when he noted the steady heartbeat and breathing of his once team leader. Another sigh of relief escaped behind his lips as the child's eyes slowly opened to stare up at him with a blank expression. Then the ink-black eyes suddenly cleared when he noted the stranger with a bright smile above him. You managed to escape. Is it over? He won't come back. Yamato whispered in disbelief. Naruto nodded before he whispered back. It's over. He won't come back. The child's eyes slowly became foggy again, but this time because they restrained tears, however it was a lost cause. Just when his lips turned up into a bright and relieved smile, tears started to flow over his sunken cheeks. It was that moment medics infested the place, gently pushing Naruto out of their way. And it was then when he felt Minato's gentle hands squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. He glanced up to his father who sent him a small, comforting smile giving a helping hand to him, so he could retreat to the background, where a medic already waited for him to treat his own wounds. But he refused it. They would heal in hours anyway and the others needed every available help more than him. He just stood there with his father's hand still on his shoulder, silently watching as the medics were working on Yamato and the others. But when an ANBU stepped next to them, he could unwillingly overheard his report, making his body stiffen. Someone already informed the council, Hokage-sama. They want an immediate meeting and someone from the council is charging Namikaze Toraku with treason and murdering Orochimaru of the Sanins anonymously. The ANBU made a hesitant side glance behind his mask before he continued with an even lower tone if it is possible. Hokage-sama, the punishment for treason is that the ANBU who had been the blonde boy's shadow for long months has suddenly became silent, losing his will to finish the sentence. But it wasn't the ANBU nor the Hokage who spoke out loud what had been left hanging in the air, 2 words that none of them dared to voice out loud. It was Naruto who murmured into the thick air. Death sentence. The blonde time traveler slowly moved his strangely emotionless and hard azure eyes up to his father, forcing his tense muscles to obey. But when a gentle hand squeezed his shoulder once again, his muscles immediately started to relax. Another arm wrapped around his other shoulder, reassuringly holding him tighter to his side like a soft pillow to lull away his fear, and Minato softly murmured into his ears, loosening the last remains of his tension. Everything will be all right. I promise. And Naruto believed every word instantly. It had been 6 hours by the time the last of the medics left the caves together with the last remaining survivor of Orochimaru's hidden activity, and another 6 more since the meeting had been started. The council was silent, despite everyone's shock, storms of indignation, disbelief, denial and even utter confusion. All of the members were dragged out from their beds, requesting their immediate presence. None of the clan leaders knew any details about what had exactly happened. Just the fact that someone had killed the legendary Sannin. Most likely the one who had anonymously charged the blonde time traveler was desperate enough to pull out this tantrum, without full knowledge of the situation. Even the always loud Jiraiya sat quietly in one of the room's corners, his gaze locked in front of him unfocused. The rare occasions he regained his composure were when he glanced toward the blonde teen from time to time, carefully avoiding Naruto's eyes. Jiraiya locked his feelings behind a wall and he struggled between his own emotions, trying to deal with the loss and betrayal of his friend, and shifting between feelings of anger against his murderer and fear for Toriku's life. But Naruto wouldn't be fooled by his teacher's calm shell. He knew perfectly well Orochimaru was one of Jiraiya's best friends. He was one of his precious people, and he killed him. It was him who killed him. Guilt rose inside his chest from time to time as he also snuck peeks at his godfather when he wouldn't notice. Soon, the court wasn't about him, his treason or his murder. It was about Orochimaru and what he had done. At the beginning of the sudden trial most members sent warning glances toward him, even Inoichi eyed him more carefully than ever. Only the Nara clan head and Uchiha Fugaku watched him with calm, but still calculating eyes. Sharingan flared into life from time to time. Even Kurama was dead silent, observing the situation without a word. Naruto finished his report an hour ago, carefully leaving out some of the sensitive things. Like how Orochimaru had blackmailed him and exactly how he was able to win a battle against one of the Sannins. It was surprisingly easy even for him. He didn't have to face Jiraiya or Minato. It was Danzo who asked the questions, trying to twist everyone against him. Lying into the face of that bastard was miles easier than lying to his parent and godfather. The false words slipped from his lips so easily that even he was afraid of himself for a blink before he pushed the thought away. He was adamant that it was the old war hawk who informed the council. It was a desperate and rash decision from Danzo. Even if he don't know much about the man, he was perfectly sure that behind his calm and emotionless shell, he was screaming inside his head because of his own stupid and desperate step. But Naruto felt that he was missing something very important. Naruto just half listened as a shinobi was listing the already processed evidence against the once cheered Sannin. The uncountable number of corpses they had found in another place in the middle of Konoha had been discovered thanks to the only survivor's statement. Somehow the small boy, Tenzo, was able to provide some important details pointing out the lab's whereabouts when Orochimaru moved him to his new accommodation. It was buried deep underground, in the middle of the ancient sewers of the oldest part of the town, hidden by several layers of seals tidily copied from the cave Naruto and Orochimaru had been fighting in. All over the place, bodies were strung up along the walls on wooden platforms, or lying around in the room ready for later use and investigation. Naruto was glad Orochimaru dragged him to this cave and not to that place. He would definitely have gone berserk in the tunnels if he had to witness that sight. It was hard enough to see people behind bars, but seeing the corpses of innocent children, Naruto shook his head and glanced toward the small podium in the middle of the council chamber. The shinobi continued listing evidence. They counted almost 100 grown man and woman, and 55 corpses of children altogether in the 2 hidden laboratories. They had found masses upon masses of notes, books and scrolls filled with information and complete descriptions of his experiments. When the man finally finished his report, a medic stepped to the center of the council room, to read out her own. Her voice faltered from time to time as she couldn't surpass some of her surfacing emotions. From the dozen survivors they had found in the chambers, only one child's condition was stable, furthermore he was conscious and already questioned. The interrogator also verified what the evidence was so clearly screaming. It was Orochimaru's secret laboratory. The other survivors weren't as lucky. They had already lost 4 of the children in the last 6 hours, and nothing gave the impression the adults would make it through the night. Silence fell when the medic finished her report and slowly moved to the background. It was now the lead interrogator's turn to step on the small podium. The child and the medic reports verified Namikaze Toriku's claims, that Orochimaru restrained him with his snake summons and he was dragged until they reached the main chamber. From that point, there is no witness who can verify Torikusan's words that he managed to free himself and kill Orochimaru of the Sannin by himself with a lucky fire jutsu. Paper ruffled as Makoto checked his notes. Torikusan claimed that he had hit Orochimaru with a combination of fire and wind jutsu while Orochimaru was on the ground after Torikusan had made a final kick to his face. Based on the post-mortem, the cause of death was a broken neck, while the fire jutsu was cast after his death, which supports Torikusan's statement. Nobody moved, nobody said a word or even coughed. Finally Minato broke the stupor as he slowly sat up to make the decision. Naruto flinched when his father called for him to stand in the middle. His slow footsteps were followed by an ANBU. "We've heard enough. I hereby close the council meeting. I, Namikaze Minato as the Yondaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, find Orochimaru of the Sannin guilty against the charge of treason and murdering, torturing and experimenting on 169 men, women and children. State your disagreement if there is any." Minato glanced around the still silent room. Nobody made any intention to retort. "Furthermore, I hereby clear Namikaze Toriku of the charge of treason and murder." Again, nothing could be heard. The clan leaders stayed in silence, only some of them glanced toward the silent and obviously exhausted teen with a calculating eye. All of them knew that Minato's relative was strong, even if he currently held only the rank of Chunin. But to be on equal level of one of the Sannin both unnerved and satisfied them. "I hereby declare all information about this case to be class secret. No one is allowed to reveal any information without the Hokage's express permission." Minato slowly ran his eyes over each and every member in the chamber, one by one, before he narrowed his azure orbs. Something changed in the atmosphere as if something had clicked inside him, making every attendant hunch over in fear, like a small child. In the next moment his stern voice echoed inside the chamber. "I don't know who were so foolish in your lines to charge my brother without any real clue and clear knowledge of the whole situation, but I can promise one thing. If I ever find evidence against who was the one who informed and gathered the council behind my back, he will be the one standing on that podium instead of my brother and he will be charged with treason by me." Minato shot one more glare toward each of the still and deadly silent members. His cerulean pools left Danzo's stoic face just a fraction later than the others. After the declaration the room slowly emptied. Some of the members stopped for a quick nod toward the young Chunin, while Inoichi made a small bow. Naruto was still carefully avoiding Jiraiya's dark eyes as he and the Sandaime passed beside him, but he still stared at the closed door silently after the two left the room. Soon, only the two Namikazes stayed in the empty room with the overwhelming silence. However, they also departed without even a single word. A harsh, snapping sound echoed inside the dim chamber as a shadowed figure channeled some of his growing frustration onto his desk, clutching the edge too hard for the wood to endure the strain. Shimura Danzo strained all of his nerves not to break his emotionless mask. Who could have guessed that the Namikaze brat would stop his ANBU from reaching the last surviving brat? And who would have thought that that brat had enough power to even spit out details like that? His undercover ANBU had informed him that Orochimaru's hideout was discovered as soon as the Hokage disappeared. He thought that with eliminating all witnesses, the charge would be enough against that damn brat. He had acted too fast, too recklessly when the opportunity that he could get rid of the Namikaze brat arose. In the next blink, he forced his muscles to relax. His old and raspy voice filled the chamber as he hissed into the darkness. Low enough that only he could hear it. That Toraku child. He is too powerful. Nobody sees what I can see, that he is a threat to Konoha. His eyes stared into the darkness, suddenly clear and focused, his face was stoic once again. Rat. An ANBU appeared beside him instantly in a crouch, head bowed carefully. Let's move to another tactic. If we can't get rid of him by force, we will make him leave Konoha willingly. The ANBU quickly looked up to face his leader, waiting for the orders. His face was carefully schooled and showed no emotion. The boy has got a good reputation among the villagers. They like him. Let's destroy that image. Start spreading the word about what happened to Orochimaru in the village. Dress as a civilian, go to the market, to the bars. Let's open the citizens' eyes to what kind of monster Namikaze Toraku is. That he cold-heartedly killed one of Konoha's heroes. Let's raise fear in the sidelines and let the villagers do the rest. The morning was awkward. Minato acted like nothing had happened before, while Kushina was weary and uncharacteristically silent. Her hand traveled toward her belly from time to time, stealing small glances toward the blonde leader. But her acts went unnoticed by the two blondes. A new presence kicked Naruto out from his own small world, a presence which sent all of his previous strength out of his body along with the blood in his face. Jiraiya stepped into the room, still carefully avoiding Naruto's eyes, but still noting his reaction, his pale face and tensed muscles. In the next instant the time traveler and his godfather were alone in the dining room as his parents retreated to give them space. Naruto stubbornly stared at his empty plate in front of him, while Jiraiya occupied the counter, leaning against it, his arms folded in front of his chest. Both of them were waiting for the other to finally start the unavoidable conversation, and finally it was Naruto, who blurted out first. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing. Finally Naruto raised his head, to meet with Jiraiya's eyes. The toad summoner looked obviously weary, dark circles sat under his orbs, while his wrinkles somehow seemed deeper from the lack of sleep and the last night's stress. You should be. The blonde shinobi worded the first thing that came to his mind. The Sannin eyed him for some time until a humorless smile tilted the corners of his mouth. My best friend died a long time ago. He died the moment he went against everything I hold dear. You've killed a soulless shell. A shadow. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but somehow nothing came out of it, so he instead shut it when the aging toad summoner let out a long sigh. You know, I was aware that something was wrong with him lately. His obsession with immortality and to learn every jutsu in the world became worse and worse with every passing day. And what is more disturbing is that myself and my sensei turned our heads from some of the things which pointed toward what he was doing in the background. We were blinded by our bonds. I did realize that Orochimaru became antisocial, that he disappeared between missions, and after Minato became the Yondaime Hokage instead of him, that it became worse. Jiraiya unfolded his arms and slowly moved to sit down at the table across from his temporary student. It is also my fault what had happened to you and the others. I should have seen the signs. Azure blue eyes glanced up suddenly, as guilt started to emanate from the Sannin's pores. No. It was never your fault. He was mad. If I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes, my opinion would be different. If I didn't see the cells, the people and the children down there, I think I would have been angry at you. I would even try to defend him. I would have tried to reason with him, try to save him. But after I saw what he had done, I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing. I'm still sorry. I didn't want to kill him. Don't be a fool. Another conversation popped up in his mind, in another time and another version of his godfather. A small smile appeared on his face while he murmured his answer softly. I'm not a fool. I'm a moron. Jiraiya raised a confused eyebrow, but let it be. But he silently agreed. He was indeed a total moron. Rin and Kakashi are waiting for you at the usual place. We'll meet there. And I remind you, Minato ordered total information lockdown. What happened down there is now unshranked secret. The last thing this village needs in the middle of a Chunin exam is the bashing of the other countries. Naruto nodded and silently left the room. He passed by his father in the living room, who watched as he silently dragged himself out from the house. Only when his chakra signature started to fade away to the distance did Minato look up to meet Jiraiya's eyes. You are cruel. After what had happened, you really sent him to the training ground? Jiraiya sank down in the couch before he answered. You also know that exhaustion is the best medicine for troubled thoughts. Jiraiya opened his mouth to tell more, when a new presence appeared in the doorstep. The Sannin let out a long sigh as his once teacher slowly approached the living room, flaring his chakra for a second to be recognizable before he stepped through the doorway. Experienced and old eyes traveled over the two sitting men, his hands unconsciously looking for the pipe from his pouch, but it was nowhere to be found. Sarutobi let out a weary sigh and also sank down into one of the empty chairs to ease away his own weariness. The three men stayed in silence. Only one or two meaningful and knowing glances were shared between them until the Sandaime broke it. How is Torakuken? Physically he was almost perfectly healed when the council meeting ended. Mentally. The blonde leader shook his head. He is too kind-hearted and naive for this profession. I saw greenhorn Chunins during the war after their first kill. Some were unaffected, while others were almost as shook up as him. Even if killing is part of being a shinobi, school and tales could never prepare you well enough for the real experience. It becomes easier and easier with time, but you'll never get used to it. You'll always remember each life you've ended. Their faces will be burned deep inside your mind forever. Minato murmured more to himself than to the others in the room, his eyes locked on his hands. And how is Kushina? Asked Sarutobi, diverting the subject. Minato made a quick and altogether thankful glance toward the third. Like nothing had ever happened. She is a little bit weary, but beside that she is okay. The seal is also as powerful as ever. I still don't know what happened to it. A fatherly smile spread across Sarutobi's face despite what had happened the last night. A small bright ray of sunshine warmed him up from head to toe as he eyed the clueless village leader. Did Kushina speak to you? The Sandaime noted the blank look on Minato's face and shook his head. I take that as a no. The once Hokage then looked at his student, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the deepened wrinkles in the corner of his eyes and mouth. One night. Only one night was enough to do the work of a decade on Jiraiya's face. And he didn't have to look in the mirror, he knew he would also find the same on his own face. And how are you, my friend? Jiraiya closed his eyes and folded his arms in a defensive manner before he answered. I could have asked the same question from you, old man. He was also your student. Not just my bastard teammate. The Sandaime let out a long and weary sigh. If I hadn't been that blind, maybe we could have found out his doings earlier. And if I even think about the fact that I almost made him Hokage instead of Minato, but I'm still hoping that deep down in his heart there was still some kindness and light beside the darkness and the madness. The old leader shook his head once more, wrinkles deepening with the motion and the new frown on his features. If it wasn't for Torakuken, who knows how long it would have been until we found out, maybe many, long years. I don't know, if it would have been me who found that situation, would I be able to do the right thing? The Sannin let out a long sigh and opened his sore mouth. I talked with the boy after the council meeting. With the one who had survived Orochimaru's experiments. He stumbled slightly over the name. He was kidnapped from an orphan house in AIM. My late teammate gathered his subjects from them or temporary accommodations in AIM. Sometimes picking up lonely, wandering shinobi. Minato grimaced. It makes sense. aim is isolated. No word would reach the elemental countries about the disappearance of orphans and people from there. If he had picked up the people from Konoha or the other big nations, we would investigate with full force. Jiraiya nodded and continued, while Sarutobi's troubled frown only deepened. We found dozens of Sharingan eyes. He was obsessed by its power that allowed the user to copy any jutsu. We found ancient scrolls about the Mangekyo Sharingan. We found several corpses with injuries which indicated a failed eye transplant, probably with a Sharingan, and notes about a new experiment, which needs a powerful host. It seems that all of his previous transplants failed because the hosts' bodies weren't ready for the dojutsu. Their chakra system was full-grown. He needed a young shinobi with still developing chakra coils and high reserves for his experiment. It seems that's why Kakashi's surgery was successful. Because he is young and his chakra system could adapt to the Sharingan and also have the necessary reserves to activate them. Or someone like Toraku. With his healing abilities and chakra level, he was a perfect subject. Jiraiya glanced toward Minato. I think I know how he appeared from thin air inside the village walls. Minato narrowed his eyes and gestured to his teacher to continue. I think that my teammate brought him here to experiment on him with one of those eyes. Yamato also told me that he liked to wear a henge with a Sharingan. He became obviously insane. That's why Toraku first thought he was in a genjutsu. That's why he thought he had been fighting with an Uchiha. He somehow managed to escape, and Jiraiya suddenly became silent, but instead of him, Minato had continued with a guilty expression. I let Orochimaru into his room to examine him while Toraku was unconscious after our first meeting in the hospital passage. When he blacked out, I left Orochimaru alone with him while I was rearranging the new ANBU guards. It was him who messed up his memories to save himself. And the more and more frequent encounters with him triggered some of his memories. His rage and hatred. Every time he looked at Orochimaru, I waited for Toraku to snap and tear him into small pieces. Furthermore, Orochimaru was in carefully restrained ecstasy to examine Kakashi when he heard about his Sharingan the day we arrived. And, on that week, Orochimaru was wounded while fighting with someone. Minato frowned before he continued. But, then Toraku never knew Nagato. Our previous theory was wrong. And how on earth was Orochimaru able to bring him here if he was able to kill him? Jiraiya shook his head and rubbed his eyes. I'm still sure he knows Nagato. There is no other way he would know about my book. That theory is still the most plausible for his background. He must be from AIM. And now, we've got a new questions, how he appeared here inside Konoha. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes before he continued. It was Orochimaru who brought him to his lab. Maybe he stumbled across him in one of his travels and tricked him into coming to Konoha with him. His resemblance to you is obvious. Maybe he tricked him with the promise of a family, that he has a relative here. I mean you. If he had fabricated that story, I'm sure Toraku would follow him willingly here. He can be very naive sometimes. It would also explain his reaction to you in that passage. Maybe even for Sarutobi. It's not unheard of if someone was restrained by a powerful genjutsu. I know several genjutsu which plays with a captive's head, showing him his rescue mission. But we won't know the full story until Toraku tells us. Minato shook his head. I don't want to push him. His past was obviously a hard one. I don't want to break him. If he wants to tell us more about himself, he will. Maybe it is better for all of us. I mean if his memories won't recover perfectly. His two companions didn't answer, they just stood there. Silently, all of them buried in his own thoughts, trying to process the happenings of the previous night. Finally Sarutobi broke it by shaking his head and letting out a long, weary sigh. You're making up your own conclusions and wild theories, and desperately trying to bring truth into them. There is no real evidence to support what you just came up with. But we should get some rest. Yesterday was a busy night. For all of us. Let's just leave your wild theories for today and not bother ourselves with these kind of thoughts. We still have a lot of things to do. Enko should have already arrived at the Hokage Tower, waiting for me and Minato. Both men turned toward the retired village leader, but they didn't retort. Instead, they obeyed his words as small children would do. Minato closed his eyes in the middle of his office in the Hokage Tower. The shocked Enko was long gone, as well as Jiraiya and Sarutobi, but Minato's racing mind and face never had an opportunity to relax. The head of Konoha's medic requested an immediate audience as soon as he was left alone. And from the first minute of the report, a deep frown had been carved upon his fine features. The Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose and opened his mouth. "Are you sure in this?" The medic nodded. "Yes, Hokage-sama. The cause of death was poisoning for everybody who we had rescued alive from the laboratory. All the survivors were poisoned beside the small kid with a slowly acting toxin. We could have easily brushed the effects to the side, but when the child didn't show any symptoms like the others, we started to get suspicious. So we performed several tests and one was positive." "When?" Minato asked in a low voice and finally opened his eyes to pierce directly through the medic, who unconsciously flinched a step back when the always sunny eyes suddenly become cold as glaciers. They looked dangerous now, like a real predator. And most likely during the rescue mission. He was in the last cell. He was lucky because of that. Someone successfully poisoned everybody in Orochimaru's laboratory, but he or she didn't have enough time to reach him before help arrived. Minato narrowed his eyes, his muscles tensed. With one flick of his hand he dismissed the medic, who gratefully retreated from the furious form of his leader maybe a little bit faster than was necessary. He really felt sorry for the traitor if his leader ever found them. The yondaime buried himself inside his thoughts, pacing back and forth inside the now empty office. 3 pair of eyes followed him from the shadows. The ANBU guards were on high alert, seeing their leaders raising frustration. Minato suddenly stopped, his commanding voice filled the tower once again. "Tiger, owl." The named 2 ANBU almost flinched despite their experience, but they obediently stepped in front of the Hokage, waiting for commands. "Get 2 ANBU squads and grab the 3 ANBU who were with me during the rescue mission. Bring them to the interrogation department and question them about the incident." The 2 soldiers disappeared in the next blink. Minato let out a weary sigh and slowly moved toward the window and folded his arms behind his back to look over the still clueless village. However, his silence was disturbed just half an hour later as one of the previous ANBU reappeared inside his office. "Hokage-sama. Report. Wolf and Sparrow were successfully captured. They didn't even fight back. But Boar." Minato narrowed his eyes and finally turned around to face with the nervous soldier, who finally continued. "Boar is dead. He committed suicide during the ambush. There had been a cyanide capsule hidden inside one of his teeth." Minato dismissed the ANBU and ran a hand through his blonde locks in the attempt to channel down some of his growing frustration. A lonely ANBU watched as his leader's anger had been slowly rising and rising until it exploded into an almost animalistic snarl. However, he wasn't aware of Minato's first intent to punch the wall with a Rasengan. The Hokage shook himself in the next second and straightened, his chakra flared for a second with fury before it faded away. "Crow." The until now lurking ANBU appeared in the middle of the room, warily eyeing his leader after the small outburst. "I have a new personal mission for you." The ANBU curiously tilted his head to the side, waiting for his Hokage to continue. "Your father, he was Shimura Danzo's teammate, wasn't he?" The ANBU stilled for a second and Minato could have sworn that he saw the obsidian eyes narrowing behind the white porcelain before he answered. "Yes, Hokage-sama." Minato made a brief nod and he stepped closer to the soldier. Not in a threatening manner, but the seasoned shinobi soon felt like an animal in a corner. Without his experience he was sure he would gulp. "Tell me, Crow. Where does your loyalty lie?" The Anbu tilted his head in a puzzled manner, and the yondaime was sure that a confused expression spread across his face behind the smooth surface of his mask. "Are you a loyal shinobi of Konoha?" "Yes, Hokage-sama." "Are you loyal to the Hokage?" "Yes, Hokage-sama." "Are you loyal to anyone else beside the Hokage and Konoha?" Minato didn't get an answer, however, only a choked sound escaped behind the Anbu's lips. A half-smile appeared on the blonde's face. "I know a lot about you. I also have my contacts." "You are having doubts about him and his methods, aren't you? You could have been his perfect soldier, but you couldn't kill your emotions, could you?" The Anbu tensed for a second, before his shoulders slumped in defeat. He slowly raised his arm to get rid of the cold porcelain mask, and the hood also slipped down to his shoulders, revealing his short and untidy dark locks. Obsidian dark eyes peered into Minato's electric blue ones, filled with regret, shame and sorrow. Only that one look convenienced Minato that he was doing the right thing. No shinobi should have that kind of look. Not someone his age. He made one step closer to the boy in his early teens and softly placed one hand on his shoulder. "I had only once spoken with Uchiha Kagami. But I know that he was greatly dedicated to protecting this village. He had accomplished much for the sake of Konoha, and I am adamant that his will has been passed on to his son." Minato watched the young boy's painful wince and reassuringly squeezed his shoulder a little. "So I ask you just one question. How far will you go for the sake of the village?" The Anbu didn't answer for a long minute, trying to figure out his leader's intentions. But when he did so, his confident voice filled the room. "I will gladly sacrifice myself in the name of peace, Hokage-sama." A soft, almost fatherly smile appeared on Minato's face. "However, I appreciate your self-sacrifice, that won't be necessary. You're going to infiltrate the infiltrators." Minato's soft smile started to widen, but in the next blink his eyes hardened as steel and the Anbu furrowed his brow in confusion. "Are you ready to become a double agent en route, Uchiha Shursui? But this time for Konoha? You are a liar. You promised me a free treat of ramen." The young Iwa genin whined behind a pout to Naruto and folded his arms in a sulking manner, who just stared back at him with a strangely restrained and emotionless face until he let out a long sigh and answered. "I'm sorry. I forgot about that." He had stumbled across the young boy on the almost empty streets of the village, or most likely Shiko had been looking for him the whole day, to Naruto's displeasure. The kid reminded him more and more of Konohamaru. He only needed a long blue scarf, and if he would wear his high-tie on his forehead to hold back his hair, instead of around his neck, they would pass as siblings. The loud Chunin had the same eyes, and he looked back at him just now in the same mocking way as Konohamaru did when he was irritated with him. A sour and painful smile crawled onto his face, watching the young Iwa genin, but it was hard seeing the shadow or the ghost of his once rival. Konohamaru had stayed in Konoha with his genin team to watch over the almost empty village and the civilians. Their bodies had never been recovered, most likely disappeared together with the walls around Konoha. Something must have shown on his face, as the child's ramblings suddenly stopped, and chocolate-brown eyes started to observe him somewhat warily. The sour smile was replaced with a false grin when Naruto ruffled the brown locks of his newest friend. "Come on, I'll treat you to free ramen after I'm finished with Jiraiya." His only answer was an enthusiastic nod. The Sannin had been late, and to Naruto's annoyance none of his friends were in a talkative mood, leaving him to sink into his own thoughts, and in a second he found himself in his mindscape face to face with Kurama watching him with calculating red eyes. "This isn't the best time, you know. We have to talk. Jiraiya could be here any moment." Naruto grumbled, but the fox's expression stayed stoic, his eyes observing. "This can't wait. Naruto snorted and folded his arms across his chest. If you want to talk about what you've done, it's not necessary. I understand its need. And I also won't confess to Minato until we have found Madara. We've discussed this subject for months and it's about the seal. Kurama interrupted him, silencing Naruto's rambling immediately, forcing him to glance up with a frown. About my seal? Yes. I've been thinking about what had happened in the cave. Even under that many chakra suppression seals, the emotion of my other self still influenced us when we used our full power. I think closing our original seal would prevent that next time. Naruto snorted once more and an angry grimace spread across his face. I won't recluse the seal. I won't lock you up, even if it is for our own good. No. Kurama's face mirrored no emotion, he kept it as stoic as it always was as he answered while he observed his companion. We will need our full power against Madara and we will need a clear head. Both of us. We can't make any mistakes. You do realize that? I do. Naruto hissed. But I won't change my mind. I won't let you be stuck behind bars once more. There has to be another way. I'll go and dig up the library to find a mind barrier or something which is powerful enough to restrain your counterpart's emotions. Kurama let out a sigh but nodded. While I appreciate what you just said, I still think the easiest way is reclusing the seal. Naruto frowned as his brain worked. Defiant eyes stared in front of himself, while his hands clenched into fists at his side. The blonde suddenly opened his brilliant blue eyes, but in the next moment he felt a familiar thug from the outside world. He made one last glance toward his companion while a giant grin appeared on his face. I know what we are going to do about that. Kurama narrowed his crimson pools, suspiciously eyeing his host for a long second. In the end he simply shook his head and motioned toward the back of the mindscape. We will talk about this later. You should go now or he will think that you are sleeping. Naruto sent a last beaming smile. When he opened his eyes in the next blink in the real world, he found himself face to face with a crouching Jiraiya staring at him just centimeters from his face. How the hell can you sleep this deep? Maybe we should delay this training. Go home and get some rest. Naruto snorted, shook his head and straightened himself, brushing off some of the dirt from his pants. No way. I need this training. And I could say the same. You look like shit. Jiraiya snorted and stepped to the side to give some space to the young boy. True. A small spar will raise both of our moods, I think. A small smile spread across Naruto's face almost instantly and he gratefully accepted the help of his godfather. In the end, he was right. His gathered frustration evaporated freely from his mind and his muscles with each punch he had given to the Toad Sage. A small weight of his burden disappeared with each hit he received and at the end of the day, he slumped to the ground by exhaustion with a satisfied smile on his face. His previous troubled thoughts were nowhere to be found. So? What's your plan? Naruto rearranged his relaxed face muscles into a wide grin. The plan is that I'm going to do what I'm the best at. Kurama raised a confused eyebrow, or at least the place his eyebrow should be. However, before he could word out his confusion, Naruto opened his mouth. I'm good at affecting people, correct? Kurama made a small hesitant nod. Then I'm going to speak with your other self sealed inside Kushina and ask you, him or whatever to cooperate to save the world from doom. Nothing could be heard for a long silent minute. Naruto just grinned at his companion, while the giant fox just stared back at him with a raised eyebrow. However, the silence was soon interrupted by Kurama's loud echoing laughter. You know, brat, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard from you. Naruto grimaced and his expression soon turned into a pout, folding his arms in front of his chest in a sulking manner, watching as Kurama slowly gathered himself from his fits of laughter. However, your stupid ideas have a tendency to actually work, Kurama chuckled, making Naruto brighten up almost instantly, forgetting his previous sulking. "So, can we do it? Can we talk to you like with the other bijou during the war?" The fox made a wandering face, then nodded. "It is possible. However, Kushina's seal is different. It is a real Uzumaki seal. We have to do it while she is sleeping, or there's a chance that we could trigger a defense mechanism in the seal. Like your own seal, Kushina's also allows a connection between the host and my old self. She might feel our..." Kurama stopped there for a moment, looking for a fitting word. "Presence." His only answer was a wide, confident grin and a determined glint in azure eyes. Uzumaki Naruto silently sat on his bed in a meditating pose. His ears twitched when the warm laughter of his mother reached his senses. Her jingling voice traveled between the thick walls of the Hokage mansion like they were made of simple paper, and a small smile appeared on Naruto's face almost instantly. He could smell her sweet smell as it filled the whole house. The infallible smell of exotic vanilla. Then he heard as the bedroom door opened and closed, the hinges squeaked faintly between the walls. Then his father's smell filled his room even behind the closed doors. The smell of freshly cut grass and wet soil with a hint of cucumber. He let out a long breath, letting his heartbeat to slow down, while forcing his senses to settle down. He reached out for an unnoticeable amount of senjutsu, and suddenly his previously settled senses spread out in a well-known manner. He could feel their heartbeat rather than hear them, pulsing deep inside him. As they settled down and floated closer and closer to the edge of sleep, their two separately beating hearts slowly became one beat, so did Naruto's own heart fall into the rhythm. However, his unmoving form faltered when he found another presence inside his parents' room. A weak, tiny, almost unnoticeable presence. Betrayed by nothing else than the faint, but still fast heartbeat. A frown crawled up on Naruto's face, and as minutes passed, it became deeper and deeper. However, it slowly disappeared. "Kurama, that is." A warm smile appeared on the fox's furry face. "Yes. That is you." Naruto didn't react, just his face mirrored the same sunny expression. He reached out for nature once more, and his senses sharpened more. He felt his own unnoticeable chakra, he could feel his own tiny little beating heart. Then it slowly moved. Nothing more than mere millimeters, as his own presence may be influencing his sleeping. Naruto didn't notice the passing time until he felt Kurama's small tug from his consciousness. If we want to do it, we should do it now before Kushina drifts into the REM phase. Naruto hesitantly nodded, and after one last glance toward his small, developing body, he reappeared between the giant ocean trees with a big, happy smile on his face. Kurama eyed his companion for a second before he closed his eyes to reach out for his counterpart. The still grinning blonde watched him, and after a quick shrug he just mimicked him and also closed his eyes. Then, suddenly, everything became silent. The previous soft ruffling of flora around them was gone. He couldn't hear as the osiers trees' long branches brushed against each other, nor the whisper of the wind as it playfully slipped through them. Everything was gone. His eyes snapped open, only to find himself inside a yellowish void. He blinked faster and faster until he realized that the lazily whirling mist wouldn't disappear by it. A soft ruffle gained his attention, and he turned his head to note Kurama's giant form behind him and the grimace on his face as he stared up. Naruto traced his gaze, and he had to swallow a sharp breath when he spotted the fox's disturbance. A giant orb occupied his vision, and the other self of Kurama was pinned in the middle of it. Giant stalks strung out from each of his tails and limbs, and one even from his chest, while several chains restrained any other movement. He was there stretched out, but the angry and even confused crimson orbs were fixed on Kurama behind him. However, his composure didn't falter. Just his grimace turned into a smirk. It was even a little embarrassed. "Well, just a little. You know, brat, it is true that I had complained a lot in the past that your seal was small and uncomfortable, but standing here and seeing my old place making my old complaints looks like a childlike tantrum. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, however the Kyuubi in front of him was faster as he snapped. What's the meaning of this? We are here because this boy here wanted to talk to you. The Kyuubi narrowed his eyes and finally glanced down to the blonde boy, who sent back a toothy grin in response and enthusiastically waved his hand. Yo Kurama too. The Kyuubi's only answer was an animalistic growl. However, Kurama watched his counterpart with calm, calculating eyes. He slowly raised behind Naruto and came closer to the seal, inspecting every single aspect of the Uzumaki seal until he settled down in front of him again, and somehow the orb seemed to drift closer and closer to him and they soon found himself eye level to each other. Kurama made a small motion with his head and Naruto immediately hopped up to his fox's head. You felt it from the very beginning, haven't you? That something is wrong, that you felt your own presence from outside but you couldn't grasp the meaning of it. Well, let me introduce this boy to you. This is Uzumaki Naruto. Our third Jinchuriki. Son of our second. We came back. Crimson eyes narrowed into slits, his gaze flickered from his smaller mirror image to the blonde boy on his head. Then after a tense second his barking laughter filled the emptiness around them. You think I'm a fool? That I'm going to believe you? No one can make a fool of the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. You are not me. I would never allow a hairless monkey to even address me, and you are letting that freak of nature on your head? Don't make me laugh, you pitiful mirage. He is worse than you were in the beginning, Kurama. But I think it is understandable. It doesn't look very comfortable. Naruto pointed out with a grimace, however both the named fox and the Kyuubi ignored him. This boy here. It is him. The old man talked about him. And now he needs your help. The future where we came from is in great danger. The Kyuubi suddenly became silent, however Naruto looked down on his companion head in confusion. He stared into the fuzzy head above in the hope that if he tried hard enough he could see through the thick fur and hard skull so he can see inside his friend's thoughts, and finally his previous statement would make sense to him. What are you talking about? Who is this old man? Naruto blurted out. However, he was ignored again. The two ancient old entities just watched each other silently for a long minute, before the Kyuubi's crimson pupils drifted up to him. Time travel, huh? The Kyuubi let out a chuckle which somehow made the soft flake on Naruto's neck stand up instantly in alarm. Let's assume for a moment that I believe you. How would you convince me to help you? The blonde perked up. So you believe us? No. Came the dull answer. Naruto narrowed his eyes and the previous pout was back again. The battle of wills began as both of the participants refused to avert their gaze from each other or blink. Azure orbs stared into crimson unflinchingly. However, Kurama stopped the battle before it could escalate any further. We will tell you everything. But first let's get rid of those spikes for some time. Before the Kyuubi could retort, the seal was gone from his flesh, his painful restraint simply disappeared from existence as their consciousness reappeared in the well-known empty void. However, the Kyuubi could still distantly feel as the seal restrained his body and chakra from moving freely. The nine-tailed narrowed his eyes even more as he eyed his counterpart suspiciously. Then he simply turned around to show his back to his companions. Who said that I'll listen to you? I'm not interested in your story. You will listen to it if you want to or not. Kurama made an encouraging motion with his head to the sulking Naruto. The blonde boy grimaced, his nose scrunched up in his displeasure, but in the end he let it go. Kurama, you don't have the right to call me by my name. The Kyuubi growled. Naruto paused and closed his eyes. He then made a silent decision and stepped in front of the still annoyed nine-tailed beast. Azure eyes bored into crimson ones. Then, to Kurama's great surprise, the time traveler bowed to the demon. Kyuubi-sama. We need your help. Your life is in danger, as is the whole world. Without your help, destruction will spread across the world when the Kyuubi is revived. The Kyuubi's face stayed blank, however a small amount of amusement still sparkled in his eyes. The great fox demon watched the bowing teen in front of him for one long and silent minute before he made his decision. So be it. I'll listen. But I'm not promising anything. Toraku, could you pass me the milk? Minato rasped out in a weak voice, and when he received the desired ingredient he eagerly poured it into his coffee. Naruto glanced toward his father from his seat next to the dining table. His eyes lingered on the messy blonde locks screaming for the help of a brush. Minato's always shining eyes were still dim by his dreams. And his pajama were still on him, ruining the perfect picture of the fearsome Hokage, the only man who managed to get a "flea on sight" warning in the bingo books. Obviously that man wasn't a morning person. Just like Naruto's mother. Every morning was the same. She and his father dragged themselves down, and until they got their boost they were simply useless. A small smile tugged at the edge of his lips, when Minato placed another cup of the steaming coffee on the table. A loud yawn interrupted his silent and peaceful morning. Naruto blinked toward his mother, who just stepped inside the room, continuously rubbing her eyes to finally get rid of the aftereffects of the night. Man, I had the weirdest dream ever. Kushina muttered while dragged herself to the nearest chair and simply dropped down, snatching her coffee like her life was depending on it. Naruto quirked an eyebrow, patiently waiting for his mother to continue. Another tiff later she did so. It was about you, Toraku, and the Kyuubi. Naruto froze. But thankfully none of them saw his shocked expression as both of them were busy with their morning routine. Minato just hemmed in front of the stove and dropped one more egg into the pan while Kushina eagerly rubbed her eyes and let out a yawn before she continued. It was funny, because there were two demons. You were talking with the bigger one, while you were sitting on the head of a smaller one. I don't remember quite clearly. The blonde time traveler could feel as a small droplet of sweat started its way down his spine and Kurama also stilled inside the pit of his seal. Kushina made a wandering face before she continued. Then the Sandame appeared in green spandex and declared that from now on ramen is the mandatory meal on every Sunday. Kushina shook her head and a wide smile spread across her fine features. This wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? Naruto's previous tension was gone in the next blink. He sent back a beaming smile and his loud laughter filled the small dining room in the next second. Kitsuchi glanced to the side, where the Yandame's brother currently occupied the counter beside him at the ramen stand. A troubled frown appeared on his face, as he observed the blonde boy, measuring him up from head to toe, and silently watching his bickering with Shiko. Even that he is a foreigner, the gossip and whispering didn't evade his sensitive ears. A rumor that Orochimaru, the strongest of the three Sannin, is dead. And it was Toraku who killed him in cold blood. However, the named blonde wasn't aware of this gossip. But he was aware that something was wrong. That something felt different when he had been walking outside. He just didn't catch the edge of it. 10 minutes later the small group headed toward their real destination, to one of the empty training grounds where Shiko had been preparing for the final round of the Chunin exam since 3 weeks. Naruto slowly walked between the two foreign shinobi, his hands folded behind his neck in a casual way. No words were exchanged between the ninja as they wandered on the crowded streets. Azure blue eyes observed the crowd around them, hovering on a small girl with a soft smile on his face. The child sent back a beaming smile when she spotted the Chunin, but suddenly an arm wrapped around her in a protective manner, shrouding her from his sight. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion, as he noted the mother's restrained scowl. Cerulean eyes moved toward the woman's eyes and what he found there frozen him to his very core. Glare. The woman glared at him. With the same hateful and pointed glare he received during his childhood from almost everybody. The same eyes looked back at him which haunted him during the first 12 years of his life. The blonde flinched a step backward, bumping into Shiko, almost pushing him to the ground, who also stopped and watched the blonde's widening eyes and shocked expression with a concerned face. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" Shiko snorted while he regained his composure, but he received no answer to his question. Naruto just shook his head, not sure in his own voice. The brownie commander stepped between him and the glaring woman, cutting off their eye contact without knowing. "Torakuken?" This kicked the stunned Chunin out of his temporary stasis. An annoyed expression spread across his face, and he pushed the shinobi out from his way, and he continued his walk with increased speed, followed by the two confused Iwa nin. Naruto's heartbeat increased, along with his breathing, as he spotted more and more glaring civilians. "Naruto!" The blonde didn't listen, instead increased his footsteps, and he soon found himself running, dashing among the people toward the training ground to flee from the glares. He leaped over a stand, lowering his height to land fluidly and instantly round a corner. But he suddenly found himself on the ground, nursing his throbbing forehead with one of his arm, as well as a child in front of him. Naruto shook his head to get rid of the dancing stars in his sight, the child in front of him also mimicking his attempt. The child's brown eyes suddenly widened when he realized who he just bumped into. "Torakusen. I was looking for you." "Not now, Irika," Naruto muttered, still nursing his throbbing forehead. But it thankfully diverted his troubled thoughts. Two other shinobi joined them in the next second. Shiko stumbled across Irika, tossing the child to the ground again. "Hey jerk! Watch, where are you going?" Irika shouted, pointing a finger to the stunned Chunin candidate. But Shiko wasn't stunned for too long. He sucked in a long breath to shout out his own retort to the insolent shrimp, but his intent was stopped when Irika suddenly jumped on his feet and rushed toward the blonde teen, his eyes wide and his eyes suddenly filled with fear. "Is it true? Tell me they are wrong." Naruto made an annoyed grunt and shook his head once more before he straightened himself, sweeping the small hands from his vest. "What are you talking about, Irika?" My mom told me that I'm not allowed to meet with you ever again. Because, she said that you killed a hero." Naruto's eyes widened, his head snapped toward the pleading small boy, his mouth falling open. He stumbled a step backward and his suddenly dry lips parted to answer, but no coherent word came to life. Tell me that they are lying. I told her that you would never do anything like that. That they are wrong. That you wouldn't kill Orochimaru-sama. You wouldn't kill a hero, would you?" Naruto opened his mouth once more to answer, but when his eyes met with Irika's desperately pleading chocolate brown eyes, he knew that he wouldn't be able to lie to his future sensei. To the first person who had acknowledged him. He averted his gaze to look at the bricked wall, but there he had to face with the observing eyes of Kitsuchi. Naruto swallowed to get rid of the dryness of his throat and slowly glanced around, to note the more and more eyes around them. Civilians, shinobi, even an ANBU stood in the background eagerly waiting for his answer. The blonde shook off the child's hands, which were desperately clutching his green Chunin vest again. "Irika. Tell me that they are wrong. Please. Irika. Please." The young Uzumaki crouched down to be eye level to the child and whispered his answer only to the child's ears. "I'm sorry." Chocolate brown eyes widened with disbelief, as Irika shook his head in denial. "No. I'm very sorry." Naruto whispered again, even lower. In the next second, Irika was nowhere to be seen as the small child launched himself into the gathered crowd. Naruto stared at the point where his sensei had disappeared, and he averted his gaze from the point only when he felt a hand on his shoulder. His brain was still numb, he hadn't been really able to process what had happened in the last 10 minutes. He glanced up to see Jiraiya's frowning face. "Come. Minato summoned you." Naruto nodded and they disappeared from the middle of the crowd with a quick shunshin. Two pairs of identical azure eyes watched each other, one standing in the middle of the Hokage's office, the other sitting behind the desk, wearing the long white coat with the sign on his back, shouting away his identity. Some disturbing things are happening in the village. Naruto made a sour grimace and folded his arms across his chest. Yeah. I heard them. Actually, I heard them today for the first time. Minato made a half-smile and glanced toward his once teacher. We had discussed the matter with Jiraiya and with Sarutobi, together with the Hokage's personal advisory body. We made a decision together. Minato gestured to the left, where Shikaku stood, arms crossed, eyes closed as he leaned against the bookshelves. The Nara head let out a weary sigh and opened his eyes. Someone has been leaking information about your incident with Orochimaru. Gossip started amongst the civilians and in the lines of Shinobi. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, but when the Nara raised his hand, he immediately shut it and let him continue. Someone is trying to break your reputation into small shards, together with Minato's. The Chunin exams and the Kage meeting is on our heels. In 6 days the first delegation will arrive and the first thing they will hear in the village is that a murderer is wandering the streets while one of Konoha's strongest shinobi is gone. The blonde teen restrained a flinch at how Shikaku had addressed him. Minato also made a sour grimace and sent a pointed glare toward his Jounin commander, but he either didn't notice it, or simply ignored it completely. The timing is awful. Konoha and Minato can't show weakness in this period or the consequences could be disastrous. The rumors have been covering only half of the truth, that you have killed Orochimaru, but they don't know what he's done. There are 3 options we have. 1. We either pretend to lock you up until the exam is over, but still deny everything. Shikaku paused and glanced toward the stoically standing teen. Or we could leave everything as it is now as option 2. You will either be shunned from the village or you will soon leave by yourself. Nobody can endure that kind of treatment for long. Not even the strongest shinobi were able to endure that kind of air around them. Even the White Fang had broken under the pressure. Naruto made a sour grimace and shook his head before he spoke. And the third option? We stop the information blackout and unveil everything about the case. All of them have dangerous consequences for you. Shikaku observed the calm Chunin in front of him for a long and silent moment, then continued. If we lock you up or tell them nothing, the viewpoint of the citizens of Konoha won't change, however you will be safer out the village gates without an official announcement. Both are just temporary solutions. Shikaku straightened himself and stepped in front of the young Chunin and looked straight into Naruto's eyes. In case option number 3, we unveil everything, the gossip will be stopped, your reputation in the village will be repaired. However, the other countries will be aware of your existence. About your potential as a future threat toward them and your connection with Minato. You will be in every single bingo book. Bounty hunters and assassins will be on your heels every time you step out from the village. Your life will be in continuous danger. Naruto stared at the commander for a long silent minute before he finally opened his mouth. And your decision is? The decision is in your hands. It's your life. Minato stated calmly. Naruto made a quick glance to his father before he looked back at his friend's father. Which is the best for Konoha? All options will show that Konoha's security is weak, letting Orochimaru to act that long in the shadows unperturbed, however with the third option, unveiling your power will give the reputation of a new powerful shinobi to Konoha, balancing it again. With the cost of your security and maybe your life. I choose the third option. Naruto answered without hesitation, making Minato send a sour smile toward the stunned Jounin commander, who after a minute of observation smiled at Naruto. I see now what Minato and Jiraiya see in you. The will of fire burns inside you, brighter than in most of us. I would be honored if I got a Jounin in my lines like you. Naruto raised a confused eyebrow. What do you mean by that? The Jounin commander snorted and shook his head. And you can be as clueless as they said. Hey! Naruto yelled angrily and folded his arms in a sulking manner across his chest, and a pout immediately appeared on his lips, but Minato's soft voice made him glance toward his father. The official announcement should be done at the finals. Most of the village will be there. That is the best opportunity to clear your name. But if we do it there, all of the elemental nations will know about our relationship. The moment the announcement is made, your life will be in danger. You do realize what you have chosen, don't you? The blonde Chunin glanced toward his father with a determined expression. Of course I do. I can handle 1 or 2 assassins or filthy bounty hunters. Then his determination turned into a cheeky grin. Besides, I'm a super awesome shinobi, aren't I? One day, I'll even kick your ass, Minato. Naruto paused for a second. His face became distant. Experienced fingers brushed against the fine insignia of Konoha on his forehead, and in the next second his eyes sparkled with a new determination. You should look out for that fancy hat of yours. Because one day, I'll have that seat of yours as Hokage. The named village leader chuckled and shook his head, while the Nara clan head observed the whole situation with calculating eyes in the background. Finally Minato's chuckle died down. Sure. Maybe one day you will be ready for my hat. But for now, you have to bear the situation a little bit longer. It will be over soon. I promise. The blonde teen nodded to Minato, and in 10 minutes the young Chunin was gone after one last glance toward his father. The Nara head let out a loud hum as the gears turned in his mind. I was serious. Your brother is strong, and he definitely has the will of fire in him. And I also read the latest reports about his missions. He is a leader type. You should think about his promotion to Jounin. A proud smile appeared on Minato's face. Yeah. I know. He's ready for that title. And maybe a little later, he will be ready for another title if I'm going to retire. Shikaku raised an eyebrow. You just received your own title as Hokage and you are already looking for a successor? A sour smile spread across Minato's features. Being Hokage is a dangerous job. You have to be prepared for anything. It seems sometimes you just forget that he joined this village a little more than 7 months ago. With quite suspicious conditions, and you are thinking about nominating him as your successor in the future? Have you gone nuts? The leader slowly walked to the windows, folded his arms behind his back and looked down at the village before he answered. I can state that you are the smartest man in this village, Shikaku. You have read all the files about him. Tell me, what do you think about his case? The named man stayed in silence for a long minute, gathering his thoughts. If I stick only to the facts in the report, I would say that he isn't a spy, a sleeping agent or an assassin. By the reports, his personality and his previous acts aren't fitting to any of the profiles of the previous cases. But the Nara narrowed his eyes. But based on the reports, he shouldn't be able to take down Orochimaru. He was either holding back the whole time, or he really got a lucky hit. Theoretically, even one genin could kill a Kage if he got a lucky shot. Do you think he got a lucky shot? No. And this could point toward that he is indeed a powerful and seasoned soldier. A Kage-level shinobi who could kill a Sannin. Maybe even you, Minato. But if the report Jiraiya made was accurate, and I'm sure it was, then Orochimaru was his first kill. All of the symptoms he showed during these 3 weeks point toward that. But why should he hide so much power? The Nara shook his head and frowned. I just don't know. Everything about him and his case is just damn confusing. Even for me. A victorious half-smile appeared on Minato's face as he turned toward his friend and advisor. Then why did you tell me that we should promote him to Jounin? The clan head opened his mouth to respond, but he closed it after one hesitant second as he found himself unable to find any logical answer. The smile grew bigger on the village leader's features. It's illogical, isn't it? You can't explain why, but when you are with him, you can feel it, can't you? There is no logical explanations for that. It's coming from deep within your soul. The feeling that you can trust in him. That you can put your life into his hands and you will be safe. When you're with him, you want to walk by his side. That is my answer. The clan head observed his leader for a long silent minute, then sent back an equally soft smile and stepped next to him to look down on the village at their feet. Your brother's going to be a very important ninja. Yes. Someone who will surpass all the previous Kage. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.